Serious, what was the closest you've ever been to killing someone? I operate heavy equipment, dozer excavators. These things weigh over 30 tons on the light side for perspective. Anyways, we had just started a brine pond project and had just hired some new laborers. They were as green as they come lol. Anyways, I used my two-way radio to ask them to come over to where I was to tear down a set or barricades so I could proceed. One of the laborers literally ran right up beside my machine without making direct eye contact or radio contact. Industry standard is to do so. I can safe out the machine. I was backing up at the time, so I was watching behind my machine. When I turned around to go forward, the laborer literally 2 inches from my tracks. Needless to say, I've never pressed the engine decal pedal as fast as I did in that situation. If I was new to the machine or inexperienced, the guy would have been an empty toothpaste roll on the ground. Had an abusive stepfather when I was a kid. A bit pedo creepy, would do things like accidentally let his robe gap open with no underwear on. Would start tickle fights as an excuse to get gropey. That sort of thing. That was nothing next to the beatings, gaslighting, manipulation and other varieties of psychological and physical torture. I hated him more than I've ever hated anyone in my life, and one night I decided to try to make rat poison tea. Turns out the rat poison we had wouldn't dissolve in the tea. It's for the best. He's still an ass, but at least I'm not a murderer. Drunk student fell into the road in front of me. I swerved and wrote off to cars and injured my passenger. I was fine. He didn't even hang around to thank me. Little wanker. My wonderful husband had several brain tumors and died a horrible, painful death. After he died, shortly before our 25th anniversary, 5 different people told me how lucky I was to be a widow and not divorced like them. When I was 15, I carried my 2-year-old cousin down a flight of stairs. When I tripped and we fell down 3 steps. She fell on the back of her head and I on top of her. It took a split second before she started crying and I thought she was dead. Thankfully, she was fine. But I'm so glad she didn't fell harder or over the handrail. Or else she would have fallen at least 3 meters and would probably be dead. Edit. Kinda reassuring that stuff like this seems to happen a lot and not just to clumsy 15-year-old me. When I was like 14 or so, I was on a swing at a park. I was going about as high and fast as that swing could possibly go. A kid who couldn't be older than 2 wandered directly in front of me as I was coming down. I slammed my feet on the ground and stopped myself about an inch away from her. My hands started to bleed from the chain, but at least I didn't drop kick a 2-year-old all the way across the park. The mother saw the thing happen, but she was too far away from us to do anything in the moment, but she ran over crying and thanking me for stopping. This unattended kid ran into the street as I turned into it. Didn't even see him at all because of how tiny he was. Just heard something hit my side view mirror and that's when I saw him rubbing his head. Driving tired once. Had a micro sleep and woke up driving down the wrong side of the road. Fortunately it was late at night. No traffic around. But could easily have killed myself and my passenger. Never driven tired since. Nurse here. Unit was very busy and I mentioned to a patient we needed to start her on antibiotics. Patient consented. I hung penicillin. Only to find out our computer said she's anaphylactic allergic to penicillin. Incredibly, she must have outgrown her childhood allergy. Beat myself up for a long time for that near miss. Won't make that mistake again. Stepdad spit in my mom's face after not having abused her in over 5 years, so I shoved him. He said he was gonna come back and kill us and ran out the door, so I followed, picked him up from behind. Carried him off the porch and slammed him head first onto the cement and then just beat the poop out of him while neighbors came out. Got arrested. And got my first felony. Mom was in an abusive relationship for about 8 years. About 6 years into it, me and my ex stopped by to pick mom up as she said the guy was drunk and she wanted to leave. We arrive and as I approach the front steps I look up into the glass door and see a pair of hands shove my mother out of view. She went frickin' flying. I raged out. Grabbed an axe that was nearby. Dude would chop trees on property and sell bundled firewood, as the guy stepped out front and downstairs. I chased him around the perimeter of the property whilst almost blacked out in anger. A buddy of his who was staying there temporarily was on the side of the house smoking a cigarette and tackled me. Luckily, the axe didn't penetrate my chest seeing as I landed face down with the axe pinned against me. Could have been all types of messy in 2 ways. Fast forward about 2 years and abusive guy gets into car wreck and passes away about 2 months after I got into car wreck on same street in a similar truck and walked away with cuts and bruises. I've decided if some way somehow I ever find out the man who molested my 4-year-old sister and gave her an which her finding out about it later in life was a large part of her suicide that he will die. The chances are slim next to none that it will ever be discovered who that person is and he could already be dead for all we know. But if I ever found out I'd send his freaking head to his family for what he did. Grabbed a screwdriver in a desperate attempt to dislodge my ex-husband from strangling me. Swung up and only put a hole in his shirt. Really wish I hadn't missed. Had a patient who was essentially a vegetable. I had to wrestle with him and keep him pinned to the bed. Most of his muscles had contractions but he was still shaking and stuff due to the pain we were probably inflicting on him, while the nurse pumped fluids out of his lung through a hole in his neck. This guy's entire existence was just lying in bed being in pain semi-choking on the fluids his body was producing inside his lungs only to be pinned down, have us remove the worst parts of it and the cycle to begin anew every hour or so. It was heartbreaking. This was not healthcare, this was torture. It would have been more humane to let him die. I felt ashamed and still do because I could not bring myself to kill the man. I was a little kid and my cousins and siblings, all a few years younger, were in the bathtub and I used the hairdryer to dry my hair. Well, obviously. Then I wanted to make waves for them so I held the hairdryer very close to the water. My mother and aunt lost it. Will always remember this how they, for obvious reasons, yelled at me for hours. Never got anything electric close to water again. Edit, wayo. Thanks for the upvotes. Also, when it is a dumb story and very lucky that nobody happened anything, please tell your children early enough how dangerous electricity and water are. Didn't see a car coming and almost turned in front of it. My passenger pointed it out to me. Edit, probs would have hit my passenger. My roommate wanted to rearrange the dorm room in college. We had bunk beds. I said we need to break down the top bunk in 2 pieces, take the mattress off, then the bottom spring bit, etc. She said no. We got this. We can just pick it up as a whole unit. I told her I do not possess enough strength to that. She told me it would be fine. So we lift this bed whole, straight off the bottom bed pegs. The height difference between us is over a foot. So I kinda dropped it trying to even it out with her end. And shock of all shocks, it ended up falling. She was backed against a windowsill. She tripped and fell back and he had caught the windowsill and the bed came down on her. One of the legs caught the sill and her head ended up being trapped between the bottom rung of the bed ladder and the sill. We had to yell and get some help. If that leg wouldn't have caught the windowsill, she would have had the whole weight of the bed come down on her exposed neck, breaking her neck, probably crushing her throat and who knows what else. Honestly, she was literal inches from death. We had to pause and just let that sink in for the rest of the night. The bed still got moved though. I had a girl that bullied me daily in the 9th grade. She told me to kill myself almost every day and that I was worthless. She threatened to beat me up. And even threatened that she would kill me. I went to the counselor and she said it was nothing and I should just ignore it. No one wanted to help me. There was one day she cornered me on the stairs. There were multiple stories and I was on my way to class. She was standing next to the railing, yelling at me, telling me how worthless I was and I should just jump off the roof to save everyone the annoyance of knowing me. For a split second I considered pushing her over the railing. We were on the 3rd floor. So I don't know if she would have died or just been severely injured. Regardless, I considered it for 5 seconds before I snapped back into reality and just took off down the stairs. I've never been a violent person with violent thoughts. But if she had gotten physical with me, I don't know what I would have done. I was 13 at the time and I'm 25 now. I still remember it sometimes and shudder. I've never had a thought like that since. Does accidentally count? Because I leaned against an unsteady bit of wall my mum had told me not to. It fell and covered my little brother, 3ish at the time. Surprisingly, he was mostly okay. A few broken bones and cuts, concussion. But it very much could have killed him. My boss asked me why I wasn't doing any work after working a 70-hour work week and taking one lunch break for the week. I was so mad and work a job where we carry knives on our person I had to throw it across the room and I just picked up my bag and walked out. This was all before my actual start time after I had been working almost half an hour and still wasn't supposed to start for another half hour. A motorcycle was hit by a public utility vehicle and went flying into the side of my car. If I came a split second later, I would have ran the guy over. Grandma got moved to a real shady nursing home. Her concierge doctor, who she paid $3,000 a year to specifically stay a patient of, refused to go anywhere except this one nursing home. It was an old piece of poop. First day go to visit her and she is covered in poop and piss. Not one person came to check on her or answered her buzzers. They dropped her day 2 and she had to go to hospital. Go to her room to pick up stuff and found a nurse in her chair eating all her food. Day later, family was visiting and said her TV was missing and they replaced it with some ghetto small one. I rushed right over. And I was like, if they robbed her on top of this, I'm going to kill these goddamned nurses. Turns out the TV was fine and people were just hyped up and over suspicious. The bad nurses did get fired and grandma had an okay time there. I mean, it's a nursing home. They are all pretty much poop. 2 days ago my boss sold the company I built completely on my own for the past 17 years. We had an agreement he would sell me the company when he was ready to retire. Instead he packaged it up with his other company and sold it to another group. Never been so sick or pissed in my entire life. All my life goals are gone and everything has changed literally overnight, but I still have my poopty job, so there's that, I guess. My mum was dying in hospice. It was undignified and she was in a lot of pain. But she was still lucid. I asked her if she wanted me to help her speed things up. For context, she was a nurse before she got sick and I knew what I could do to make things happen. She told me she wished I could, but didn't want me to get in trouble or go to jail. We laughed about it a little bit. I maintained I would have a bull in jail. She died later that week. I spent most of it by her side. I am 100% pro-assisted euthanasia. Watching her go was torturous. My older brother, it was after my mother had passed away. I was working 3 jobs so that my older brother and 2 younger brothers could carry on studying and make something of themselves. 4 years and I find out, instead of him paying the bills, I was giving him more than enough for all the bills. With the money I was giving him, it was not enough. He was taking out debt on my name. Turned out after 4 years of working 3 jobs non-stop, I was in about 100k debt with no money left in my bank account. The only reason he did not die that day was too many people got in the way. I didn't want to hurt anyone other than that trash of a poop. 5th grade, we were studying the ancient Greeks. And we had a feast for it. My mom and I prepared baklava. Found out that a girl in my class, let's call her K, was allergic to almonds. She didn't know. Fricking traumatized this 10-year-old boy. Working at a fast food shop, my friend who was very allergic to peanuts asked for our shop's version of the blizzard. I joked, "You want that with peanut butter cup, right?" Haha, we both chuckled. He said no and asked for cookie dough. For some unspeakable reason. No a single clue why. I made it with cookie dough and peanut butter cups. Handed it to him without a second thought. He brought it back like a minute later and said he thinks he saw peanut butter cup in it. And sure enough, My dumb teenage ass put this man's literal death poison in his ice cream. I apologized 100 times. He said it wasn't a big deal. I lived with that anxiety causing thought for a while. Well, this is the most calmer I've ever gotten. What do I do with my hands at this point? Mom died in March of 2015. I was 14. Went to Philmont. NM that summer for 100-miler, scouts. Arsehole leader that came with us rode my ass the whole time for whatever reason. Kept targeting me and pushing my buttons. Finally we stopped and he just out of the blue walked up to my friends and I and said, now y'all better be grateful for your parents. One day they might not be there. Isn't that right, Thomas? And poked me in the ribs with his fat fricking fingers. He started walking away and mind you I really hate tough guys. Makes me cringe harder than just about anything. But I pulled the knife out of my pocket with the intent to gut him but a friend almost grabbed me. Again. I'm not trying to be a tough guy. Just made me angry.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.